Good morning. We welcome you to our special meeting for fiscal year 2025-26 budget deliberations. Today is Monday, June 23rd, 2025. We take note that a quorum of the Board of Supervisors is present. The Chief Executive Officer, County Council, Executive Officer, and the Sergeant at Arms are all here to assist. We will begin today's meeting with the county's land acknowledgement. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, Fernandinho Tataviam, Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva, Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva, San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Quiche Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City, County, Native American Indian Commission website at lanaic.lacounty.gov. Executive Officer, please play the Code of Conduct.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I please have your attention? The meeting of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors is about to commence. A code of conduct will now be read, and we request that you comply with it to ensure the efficient administration of the meeting. Members of the public, it is your right to participate in today's board hearing, and the board encourages such participation. However, the right of the public to address the board must be balanced with the need to ensure that public comment does not interfere with the orderly course of the board's business. All are reminded to abide by the following rules. Speakers must cease speaking immediately when their time has ended.
10 minutes out.
Public comment on agenda items must relate to the subject matter of that item. General public comment is limited to subjects within the jurisdiction of the board. Public comment does not include the right to engage in a dialogue with board members or staff. Please remain respectful of the forum and refrain from uttering, writing, or displaying profane, personal, threatening, derogatory, demeaning, or other abusive statements toward the board, any member thereof, staff, or any other person. Members of the audience should be respectful of the views expressed by speakers, staff, and board members, and may not clap, cheer, whistle, or otherwise disrupt the orderly conduct of the meeting. Any person engaging in conduct that disrupts the meeting is subject to being removed from the board meeting. And finally, if you witness conduct or behavior by other members of the public that disrupts your ability to remain engaged or participate in this meeting, please notify the Sergeant at Arms or other county staff. Thank you for your cooperation.
Today's meeting order will be the Chief Executive Officer's presentation, followed by remarks by members of the board, public comment on all budget items 1 through 5. Then the Chief Executive Officer will present each budget item in numerical order. We will now hear from our Chief Executive Officer, Fecia Davenport.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Can we put the slides up, please? Good morning, Supervisors. Today marks the budget deliberation phase of the county's annual budget process. This represents your board's opportunity to consider what are called final changes to the recommended budget that was adopted in April. Today's presentation, I will walk you through the various steps and approvals required for our new fiscal year, which begins on July 1st. I'll start with a brief PowerPoint presentation. First slide, please. So this is the second phase and the shortest budget phase of the 3 phases that make up our budget cycle. In this phase, we update revenue projections and account for important changes in the recommended budget. Even though we continue to face many budget uncertainties and will have an opportunity to make additional changes before the budget cycle concludes, we must have a balanced final budget adopted before our new fiscal year starts on July 1st, which is why we're here today. Our objective is to sustain vital county services in the face of unprecedented budgetary threats and pressures, and to do this without creating a structural deficit, which would undermine our fiscal integrity and jeopardize our recently affirmed high credit ratings. Next slide, please. I just mentioned the many budgetary pressures, challenges that are coming our way simultaneously and from multiple directions. These are shown on the right side of the slide. They include the $4 billion cost of the AB 218 settlements to date, extensive costs and lost revenue from the January wildfires, increasing personnel costs due to our labor negotiations, uncertainty about impacts from the state budget, and serious threats to our federal funding. Taken alone, any one of these would be daunting, but taken together, they are simply unprecedented. Compounding our difficulties is the fact that our local unrestricted ongoing revenues available for programming continue to decline. This is shown in the graph on the left side of this slide. This slide shows that our unrestricted ongoing local revenues are at their lowest point since fiscal year 21-22, a 5-year low. This is driven in large measure by slower growth in property tax revenues, growth that in the past has helped fund many of this board's new priorities. Although the assessor is forecasting a modest 3.25% annual uptick in property taxes, this is a revision that adds about $18 million in additional revenue in this budget phase, growth remains lower than what we have seen in previous years, which means that we have less funding, less available revenue for programming needs. For example, from a high of $450.5 million in new revenue just 3 years ago, this year's projection is $252.2 million. Overall, new ongoing local funding going into the 25-26 fiscal year, as I said, is at a 5-year low and nearly 60% lower than fiscal year 22-23. So to quickly do the math for this budget, we are adding about $18 million in additional property tax revenue, but at the same time, we are subtracting $20 million due to a drop in Proposition 172 sales tax, which have been declining for several years now. This means that we have no new ongoing unrestricted revenue and funding, basically what we call NCC, our net county costs, in this budget phase to use for new or expanded programs. Next slide, please. So, if we have no new unrestricted local money, what is changing in this budget phase? Although we are unable to expand or launch any new programs, we are adding revenue, but this is revenue from other sources, like special districts, Measure H, and incoming federal and state dollars, and rolling over some one-time funds in advance of the end of the fiscal year to grow the budget by $886 million for a total budget of $48.8 billion. We're reducing the size of our workforce essentially by 9 positions for a total of 117,091 budgeted positions. We are accomplishing this by cutting 176 vacant positions. And those cuts will be offset by 167 new positions that we are adding, resulting in a net reduction of 9 positions. All of these new positions are being funded with revenues from outside sources or offset by deleting budgeted positions. I'd like to underscore that all of the revenues added in this budget phase are either restricted resources, such as Measure E funding in the fire department and Measure H dollars for housing and homelessness services that may not be repurposed for other uses, or transfers of one-time funds expected to remain unspent at the end of the fiscal year. This money would normally be carried over or reallocated at the end of the fiscal year during the supplemental budget phase. But we're making these transfers now in order to have money on hand to pay for anticipated cost of living increases for our county workforce. This means we would not, this is money we would not otherwise have available. Next slide, please. Beyond the changes I just described on the previous slide, we are recommending some unprecedented adjustments to meet the moment of these unprecedented financial challenges. to achieve $128.5 million in savings to help us pay for the increased labor costs I mentioned on a previous slide. We are recommending two solutions. The first is to reverse $50.5 million in funding from programs and services that were recently approved in a recommended budget on April 15th. The second is to take the unusual step of using one-time rather than ongoing funding to support several programs and generate $78 million in ongoing savings. We are taking this extraordinary step because we simply have no alternative. So to recap, we are using this approach because we need to. There are no other alternatives on the table that would make sense for us at this time, other than making deeper cuts in this budget phase. Taken together, the unprecedented measures we are recommending are essential to helping us support negotiated bonuses and cost of living adjustments for our workforce. But even with these measures, we will still need to do more in the next budget phase, which I will explain on the next slide. Going into the supplemental budget phase in September, which will include our three-part budget phase, we have asked departments to prepare plans for 5.5% cuts that will also be needed to fund negotiated COLAs and bonuses for our county workforce. These cuts are expected to impact widely used public programs and services, some of which are shown on this slide. These include Parks After Dark and the extended summer swim season at county parks. We are also anticipating a 2-day-a-week closure of regional parks and lakes, cuts in youth jobs and arts internships, closure of probation offices in Santa Monica and Valencia, and cuts in the Center for Financial Empowerment in the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. I'd like to emphasize that these new cuts, which are needed to pay for our labor agreements, are on top of and in addition to the 3% cuts already implemented in the recommended budget phase to help pay for the $4 billion settlement of childhood sexual abuse claims filed under AB 218. As we navigate the rising costs of labor and litigation, other challenges to our budget are just around the corner. Next slide, please. As we move toward the end of the budget process on September 30th, we are continuing to closely monitor actions at the state and federal level that are likely to impact the county. A few key dates. The governor has until Friday, June 27th to act on the joint legislative budget agreement. He can sign it or veto it or line item veto some items. We then expect the governor and the legislature to continue negotiations for the next couple of weeks on any outstanding items and to work on budget trailer bills through the end of the legislative session on September 12th. We're also preparing for what could be significant cuts in federal funding, cuts that could run into the hundreds of millions of dollars or more, as we have previously briefed your board. One federal process that is underway now is reconciliation, which focuses on developing the federal spending blueprint for the next 10 years. The House passed its version of the bill in May, and the Senate is now working on its own version. The other federal process underway is appropriations, which involves 12 bills that need to be passed by October 1st. And if not passed, a continuing resolution would need to be passed in order to avoid a federal government shutdown. These bills are of particular interest to the county because they contain provisions that could substantially affect county funding. And I'll take the last slide, please. Supervisors, this concludes my presentation. Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you to continue with the agenda.
Thank you for that. We will now hear from board members, beginning with District 1. Supervisor Solis.
Yes, good morning to everyone, and thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Fija, and your team for preparing as well as our department heads, this budget that's before us today. I have mixed feelings about it, obviously, and I think that shared sentiment with many folks in our communities because of so many things that are not necessarily under our control, but some of it which is outside our control. And I know this has been a real difficult time for all of us. Just this weekend, as one example, I won't go into that, but I'm sure we'll talk about it at a later time. But any decision we make about the budget are always hard. It's always about the pros and cons, who wins, who loses. Unfortunately, we've gone through some really terrible times that you've pointed out, and we've had to take some drastic measures. And I want to point out on your chart that you say that the state budget uncertainties, declining revenue growth, labor costs, wildfires, AB 218 settlement, and federal cuts. For me, the one that is a real unknown right now is the federal cuts, because that's going to go to the heart of our safety net, and meaning that our healthcare services, Affordable Care Act, everything that we've worked on for the last 17 years, as long as I can remember, have been to expand the safety net. And we did it without imposing regard to those individuals that couldn't pay or that represent a majority of our workforce. And those are the people that keep our economy going. We did that, and now we're faced with some challenges. But on a lighter note, I do want to say that I'm happy that at least we're at this point, and that we are right now in this moment in time, because that's what the budget is. It's a picture of what's happening right now, is that we're moving along, and the wheels on the train have to keep going. And just as we are making these decisions on the budget, we also know that we have still some unresolved issues that will continue to face the board. And part of it will be our labor contracts with our employees. Hopefully that will get resolved and those negotiations will go well. I think we have, this board, I know I have worked and try to work in transparency, but also making sure that we're level-headed about what we do and how we move forward. So I hope and appeal to our labor partners to please recognize that and to continue to negotiate in good faith with our teams, and I appreciate that. I also want to recognize all of our LA County employees, many of whom are sometimes invisible to us and many that are more public. Our public safety, as well as our firefighters, but more importantly, the people who go in and out providing services every single day, whether it's DPSS, DHS, mental health, Parks and Rec, registrar recorder, whatever it might be, tax collector and what have you, the job still has to go on. So I want to thank all of our county employees for the work that they do. But I know that there's a lot of other things that are impacting the workforce that are heavy on their minds, because we've heard from some of them. They've contacted our offices, part of which is the unsettling ICE raids that are going on right now. I'm even hearing from our own employees that are feeling that pain and uncomfortableness, anxiety, as well as how they provide services to our clients, whether it's going into a DPSS office or a park or any event or a senior center. Either their people are not going, or if they go, they are only staying there for a short time. And I'm very concerned about that. With the National Guard permeating many of our communities, including outside of the city of LA, but in our San Gabriel Valley, Pomona, recently, and I know in the 4th District, Pasadena as well. And we've seen some things that they're not just imagined, now they're real. People are worried. And they are looking to the county to see what assistance they can provide. So I do want to thank the county board, as well as our CEO and our staffs, all working together, trying to see how we could provide some semblance stability to the people that we do represent. While we can't do everything, we can certainly continue to expand our efforts, our networks, especially with our community-based organizations. And I'm happy that we were able to help them in some way, even during this budget process and before, to expand their reach, to help provide for that safety net, but also for those immigrant and vulnerable communities right now that are saying, what is going to happen to me? What does my future look like? I know that this budget looks very different than it has in the past, and this budget is $48.8 billion. And as you said earlier, is about 885.6 million, which was approved this past April. It's an increase, right? And also the fact that we have 117,000 employees, but that didn't ratchet up too highly. You talked a little bit about that. And I'm concerned because as you said, we're not really accounting for what's going to happen at the federal level. And we know already that many of those grants are jeopardized right now, and that means full-time employees and services, and that is also going to be another hit, I think, that the county will take. But we're not the only ones, and we have to work with our state government. Hopefully our governor will help us, but I know that there's not going to be a lot to help backfill. And I know people here in this room today are probably wondering what it is that we can do. We're going to have to prioritize. We're going to have to prioritize. And in my opinion, as some members have said before, there's only so much meat on the bone. And we're going to have to make some hard decisions, and we'll do that, I hope, with the support and voices of our community. I do want to say that, I do want to underscore this. I want to thank the board. I want to thank our CEO that the budget does include, continues to include the $5.5 million for the Represent LA program to provide immigration defense for our community. And now it is so more important to have those services available. Other items that I think are worth mentioning is the State Mental Health Service Act, known as MHSA, $20 million for capital improvements at our board and care facilities, which we know is a priority. And I want to underscore that 250 beds will be made available in Westlake. That's close to the MacArthur Park area, and 30 beds in Highland Park in my district, and $35.6 million for capital subsidies for Home Key Plus program for permanent supportive housing. And many of those beds are going to come online in El Sereno and in Westlake in the 1st District. I also want to give a shout out for the $3.6 million for the Stay Housed LA program that provides legal support for tenants facing eviction to keep them housed. Now more than ever, we're getting calls from people that have lost their jobs that are now faced definitely with eviction. So they're going to need these resources. And I know it may not be a lot for some people, but we are attempting to do the best we can. We can't forget that despite everything else that we face in this moment, that homelessness persists and will require an even more intentional support as our residents navigate the ICE raids, the job loss, and inflation. And I was pleased to see that we have $5 million for parks from the Department of Mental Health for a program that they have known as Parks Wellbeing. I can't underscore how important that is right now, especially in communities that I represent, like Belvedere, City Terrace, Obregon Park, and even in the Bassett, San Gabriel area, where the park is a refuge place for people to go. And people are experiencing mental health trauma, and many of them are our seniors and our parents who are reluctant to even let their children go by themselves to school, walk to the park. They are terrorized, and I want to underscore that word. But I know we have a ways to go, and this is only mid-part of where we are in the budget process. We still have to come back in the supplemental in September to make those final decisions, and I know that you've done what you can, and we will work together as a board and hearing from our partners as to where we go next. But make no mistake about it, colleagues and the public, we are in severe economic times. While the budget may look like it's healthy, it is a sick patient. And people have to be reminded that we went through some tremendous challenges that you stated earlier, the $4 billion that we will have to pay out over the next 20 years, and that is for settlement claims, and a staggering unprecedented amount that the county has ever had to pay. And I think we're the only county faced with that in the country. An estimated $2 billion attributed to the wildfires in what was one of the most costliest fires in the state of California. And then the looming federal cuts from the Trump administration, as we said. We're still unclear about all of that. And now we have to face the potential of our country possibly going to war, which will be another economic blow globally, but more importantly to places like here in Los Angeles County. My message to our residents and constituents and to our small businesses is that the county will work to do whatever we can to help provide you with what you need as best we can. And I want to continue to sit here at the dais to work on behalf of all of our 10 million residents in the county and to try to do our best in steering this ship that right now may have a little cracks in it, but much of it wasn't intentional, and we have to fix that. So thank you very much, Madam Chair and our CEO.
Thank you, Supervisor Solis. Supervisor Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Davenport, for your presentation. And I started to count the number of times you said unprecedented measures. I think, sometimes people can get really comfortable. We say, oh, it's the worst ever, it's the worst ever, and then somehow magically the county has navigated its way through and found a path. Up till now, the county has had the privilege of saying they've never had to do layoffs, say what they've never had to do when other levels of government have not been so fortunate. And when I thought about this weekend, I thought about a lot of things. We were having a sidebar about how we too are feeling as Angelenos and as Americans. We are at a time when we are being inundated with misinformation. And that is mixing with our own fears and our own emotional response to what we're experiencing in our very own communities, what we're witnessing. We as a county are still attempting to recover off the heels of the fire, and then the National Guard showed up on our blocks, uninvited. And so I think that this hearing and what is going to be so important for the county to do is to lay out in crystal clear language so people understand the circumstances we are facing as a county. People understand what's outside of our control, what's inside of our control. People understand that there will be winners and losers. There will be winners and losers. As angry as that makes me, our hand is being forced. And while I've always talked about the budget being a reflection of our values, our collective values as a nation are being questioned. And that certainly is reflected when we see Medicaid being proposed to be cut and just a variety of federal programs. And so I thank you, Ms. Davenport, for laying out your slides to make it very clear about the facts of what we as a county are facing, the facts around the $4 billion payout, the facts around our increased labor costs due to our negotiations with labor around the COLA, the facts that although we've done those negotiations, what the solution that's before us today does not include a solution for a group that we are hearing from weekly, IHSS workers, who, as they articulate, are some of our lowest paid, doing some of the hardest work caring for the most fragile in our society. This solution does not factor in any kind of adjustment to their pay. Again, winners and losers. Again, like many of my constituents, that makes me mad too. What I am clear about is the county, we use the term, I think, safety net kind of loosely, and I don't know if people really understand what that term safety net means. It means that we are the provider of last resort. It means that the federal government can pass a budget and carry deficit over. It means the state, while the state has to pass a budget that's balanced, in that we are the provider of last resort. If a medically indigent adult shows up at a county facility, we have to provide those services. And so other levels of government kind of get this pass. We are the safety net, the provider of last resort. So even when we cut, there will be services that we must provide. Public health, I think, is a perfect example. We know that recently, because of some federal actions, We have 38 AmeriCorps members who work with our Department of Public Health who were terminated. The county HIV prevention services system is in jeopardy because of the federal HIV prevention grant cuts. And trusted HIV STD service providers are unable to keep providing their life-saving services. In fact, nearly 100 HIV prevention staff in local community-based organizations have received layoff notices, as did 38 contract staff in the county's HIV STD system. Again, the county is the provider of last resort. We have 2 cities in our county, Pasadena and Long Beach, that have public health departments, but Pasadena approved a budget that included a reduction for funding in its public health department. This just 5 years out of an international public health economic pandemic. We are the provider of last resort, and I keep emphasizing that because that means to me that we have to be all the more vigilant in our effort to be fiscally responsible, because we don't get a pass like the federal government where we pass a budget that has a deficit in it and that we borrow against future generations. We don't get the luxury that the federal government does. So while we are being held hostage by their actions, many of which reflect no core similarity to the values of LA County, we are forced to figure it out. We have no choice. It makes it imperative that we sustain many of our, what I will call, public safety services, which public health is a part of that from my perspective. We've got to ensure that we provide crucial services in our park system, especially during the summer while young Angelenos are out of school. Recognizing our limited resources, I believe we've got to prioritize the services, assets, and activities that are both used, particularly in communities of color and poor communities, that are used the most and have the best impact in our communities. Parks and our pools are both cooling centers and places of safety and refuge and places to go when school is out, when your parents can't afford high-priced camps. You know, our parks provide a critical service in the 2nd Supervisorial District, as reflected by the petition I saw this morning on Nextdoor, where Angelenos in the 2nd District are calling to question the 2-day closure of our regional park, Kennehan Park. They eloquently talked about what that park means to them and their families and how important it is. So these services aren't simply nice to have. The county saves lives. The parks help reduce crime and violence while creating opportunities for people to have safe refuge. I was proud to fund Roy Campanella Park for what we've dubbed our Freedom Summer, a park that has experienced a high incidence of violence, a park nestled in the middle of a community, an unincorporated area that has relied on that park for decades and decades. So I believe we have to continue to figure out how we prioritize our services and how we reduce the pain in our effort to find this balance between picking winners and losers, because that's what we're going to have to do. It bears repeating that our work to continue to house our unhoused is of critical importance to every Angeleno, particularly as we are adding to the regional housing and homelessness ecosystem. You know, we need to make sure that the multiple changes to the system does not cause undue disruptions to the system. And as the county reimagines its homelessness services system under public scrutiny, it's essential that the voices of providers and people experiencing homelessness are not only included, but centered, ensuring the transition is seamless as we have committed that it will be, that it's inclusive, and results in a system that is undeniably effective, is better than the system we're walking away from, and visibly transformative. I believe equity is the best problem-solving and poverty-disrupting policy, and the board is committed to this value, and I will continuously emphasize it as a budget North Star imperative. So as we consider making budget decisions and tough decisions and cuts, this value ought to be front and center, not a check mark or a buzzword. I appreciate that the Internal Services Department has redirected existing resources to staff the equity and county contracting priority. And I also appreciate the resources for the Office of Cannabis Management. I think it's important, and I'd like to draw our attention to the Juvenile Justice Realignment Block Grants. Final changes includes using $1.25 million in block grant revenue to fund 7 new positions in probation. And I feel strongly that we should look at other ways to utilize this money rather than expanding probation staffing at this time. I believe we should be looking at ways to use this funding and similar funding streams to further expand prevention services, some of which have been provided by our Department of Youth Development. Again, we are a Care First Jails Last county, and our budget should reflect that same commitment. Again, I know that we're going to have to make really tough fiscal decisions this year, and departments will have to try to find some savings, incur the curtailments that we just heard are now up to 8.5%, all the while ensuring that the county remains fiscally solvent so we can provide the life-saving, life-sustaining services that Angelenos are expecting of us and are entitled to. And so I know our county department heads are here, and I call on you and the CEO that when considering the hard decisions to find savings, to factor the impact on our residents. I realize that mathematically it can be easy to say 3% or 5% curtailments across the board make the most sense. However, some departments stand between our residents and devastating outcomes. So I am hoping that we will be surgical and recognize the unique role every department plays in our safety net, because again, we are a provider of last resort. Times of fiscal uncertainty truly push us to identify where our priorities really are. We are having to fight against our federal government in some instances, and that is a unique situation. We've been here before where we've had deficits, where we've had to kind of borrow from Peter to pay Paul. But this is a unique year, given the disasters of the fire, given the inhumane cuts the federal government are seriously considering, and given our responsibility to keep Angelenos safe, housed, and alive. Leadership in times of budget crisis requires prioritizing mission and people first. And I remain committed to ensuring the county's budget provides for our most underserved and in-need residents. That's the fundamental job of the county level of government. So we've got our work cut out. We have no idea what's going to hit us next from the federal government. We have no idea how the state is going to be able to manage their deficit and the impact it will have on us. So the supplemental budget phase in October will be a time. Hopefully we will have clearer directions from our funding sources, that being the federal and the state government. I'm clear from your presentation that we know the projection in terms of our own income generating source, our property taxes, are not keeping pace in terms of where they have been. So like every other Angeleno, I'm mad too. And we are going to have to figure out how we develop a budget with the curtailments that are required and make sure that those curtailments aren't levied on the backs of Angelenos who can least bear that brunt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Horvath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to begin by thanking our CEO, her budget staff, and all of the departments involved, as well as especially the auditor controller, um, to make sure that we have a budget that is balanced and is responsible to as many of the needs as we possibly can address with the resources that we do have. And I know that this budget takes a lot of work, most of the year to complete, in fact. And so I want to thank you all for your work. I know this year's budget season began the open and transparent budget process outlined in Measure G, including public budget hearings. And I believe these budget hearings allowed our departments to present their unmet needs in public, allowed for more open and transparent discussion. And these hearings are a welcome addition from my point of view to our process, providing valuable insight. And I'm eager to see how this process evolves to provide even greater transparency and understanding into how we invest our public's funds and how we use these resources to meet the needs that are being surfaced. Um, a nearly $49 billion budget with many complex funding sources is not an easy feat to accomplish. So additional transparency is important, especially this year when we are facing many financial challenges. And I think any reasonable person says, $49 billion, how can you say that you are challenged with a number like that? And I think our CEO's presentation outlined some of why we are saying that we are experiencing the challenges that we are. I want to thank the advocates and members of the public and stakeholders who have been involved in our budget process and who I know will be continuing to engage in the future. I appreciate holding us accountable and asking the questions that, from as you see it, don't make the math, and help us understand where we need to be doing a better job of explaining why we are experiencing the circumstances that we are, and painting the picture for everyone to understand what it is we're trying to accomplish with this budget. Your perspective and input are invaluable to me, and I believe your voices are essential in our budgeting process. This year's budget, suffice it to say, has not been an easy one, and our constraints will continue into the supplemental budget phase. At the same time, it's frustrating we can't fund many worthy program requests we receive from departments, community-based organizations, and our public that haven't been included to date. By far the most significant impact that we are facing this year comes from the AB 218 settlements. These cases are horrendous. There are far too many victims, and in most cases, these abuses occurred decades ago, but we're just now seeing the financial impact. We obviously must resolve these cases. Unfortunately, that means we will not be able to expand programs and services over the next period of time. And we also have to make cuts in order to address those costs. I know that we have a plan, and I'm glad that we, as a fiscally responsible organization, have the means to implement a detailed plan to pay for our unprecedented settlement of over $4 billion. Our plan includes upfront cash payments over the next 5 years, as well as the issuance of long-term bonds. And we have already set aside resources for both near-term and long-term payments to address this impact, and will continue to do so over the next several years. And I especially want to thank the CEO and her staff for compiling this plan, which is critical to making sure that not only are we addressing where our obligations are, but we are keeping our financial status with all of our rating agencies to ensure that how we proceed, it doesn't cost us even more. Even though this settlement is unprecedented, we found a way to pay for it and keep the county's budget somewhat balanced, and at the same time facing other budget pressures, including recovery costs from the January wildfires, the need to provide our workforce with fair cost of living adjustments, and so much more. Our wildfire recovery continues to progress. I want to thank our state partners for stepping up in a critical way at a time of need to provide revenue backfill as well as upfront funding while we wait for reimbursement from the federal government. These funds are incredibly helpful to us and our community members who are rebuilding their lives. They cannot afford to wait. Getting back into their communities is critical. And so we thank our state partners for really understanding that and knowing that locally, that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of implementing how we get this work done. Despite our budget challenges, it's important for us to continue to provide fair financial compensation to our county employees. Our employees work incredibly hard every day to care for our county residents. They are our service delivery, and I remain committed to engaging in negotiation with that reality in mind. Providing them with fair compensation is not only the right thing to do, it benefits all of us by infusing additional monies into local economy and ensuring that our employees and their families are adequately supported. To Supervisor Mitchell's point about budget reflecting values, certainly, and with the budget constraints, there are many things that we will not be able to fund that we want to. And yet, this budget does include a commitment to funding for our TGI community, funding for our immigrant population, and essential continued healthcare services that we are not only required to provide, but we believe in providing as Los Angeles County. And so at a time where many are considering whether to step away from their values and investment, we are not. We are doing everything that we can to make sure that our county funding continues to reflect the values that people expect here in Los Angeles County. And while our budget is balanced, in order to address these challenges that we face, we will need to make some cuts. In the recommended budget, we approved curtailments of 3%, which largely eliminated vacant positions and funding for services and supplies that we could absorb with little or no impact to county services and programs. As a part of the supplemental budget, additional curtailments will be implemented in order to keep our budget balanced. These additional curtailments will come before our board during the supplemental budget, so we will have several months to refine them, but we know that they will be difficult no matter how they are implemented. With that in mind, I wanted to express some of my thoughts and concerns to our CEO as she and her team compile the supplemental budget. After reviewing the curtailments, I would ask our CEO to work with several departments to refine and find creative solutions to some of the cuts. For the departments of Parks and Recreation and Beaches and Harbors, my understanding is that both of these departments are seeking to increase fees to offset some of the cuts that they will be seeing. And so I would ask that we work with both of these departments to execute those fee increases, to restore some of the service reductions, and to ensure that increased revenue stays within those departments to ensure that they're able to provide those critical services. Next, I would ask that we work with the Department of Animal Care and Control to mitigate the impact of their cuts. This department has continued to struggle with budget limitations, and we need to look at their budget carefully. The department leads very important work, and I want to ensure they have the resources to fulfill their critical mission, especially given that our contract cities have been paying increased rates over the last several years, but we're proposing to cut service. So I understand that the reimbursement rate for contract cities hasn't been equal to the service they've been receiving, but I also don't think that they're going to understand how it would be appropriate to reduce the department's budget as we're asking them to pay more. So figuring out how we review this budget and ensure that our Department of Animal Care and Control is appropriately funded, particularly as our contract cities continue providing more funding to us, is an area that I know we need to focus on. Additionally, I'm concerned with the position cuts at public defender and the alternate public defender. I'm particularly concerned that supplemental funding to these departments through the CFCI program has been eliminated. We are required to provide these services. So noting that we are required to provide them, what is our plan to mitigate cuts to public defender and alternate public defender, and why did we eliminate CFCI funding to these departments?
Thank you, Supervisor. Let me clarify. The board will be deliberating on the CFCI CEO board letter tomorrow. Let me start out by saying I think it's important to place this conversation in context. Yes, the public defender is undergoing curtailments like the rest of the departments. I think what you don't see clearly in the budget is that the public defender will receive 27 new positions through this budget phase, but they're not NCC funded, or they're not funded with unrestricted NCC. So for example, they will receive $533,000 in 3 positions under the JJCPA grant. They'll receive 6 positions and $1.5 million under Measure A. I won't bore you with all the details. So they've had a curtailment of 32 positions that are NCC funded. At the same time, they will receive 27 positions that are funded through other resources. So it's not necessarily our unrestricted NCC, but they are receiving staff. The second thing I would say is in terms of identifying the impacts. This is the point in the process in the budget where it is really hard because we are trying to keep the budget balanced. We do have multiple and new pressures. We don't know what the pressures from the federal and the state might be, but we know that we have some known and existing pressures now, and we're trying to manage them to stay so that our budget does remain balanced. It was these very difficult decisions that we talked about in New York with our credit rating agencies that they knew this is difficult, but we also understand that it has to be done. So what I would say in terms of having the public defender mitigate the curtailments, I think you have other departments that also provide other valuable services, and I understand that we are required to provide public defender services. On the whole, public defender is receiving positions in this budget phase, so they're not taking a straight 32 position curtailment. That's number one. And number two, what we would want to do is work with the public defender to prioritize their priorities. We know that they have a lot of different programs that they participate in. We know that some are core programs that are required by statute or county code, others are not. And so what we would want to do to work with the public defender is let's figure out a way to prioritize those programs that are core mission. What are the things that we absolutely have to do? And what are the other things that we must do as well, but maybe they're not as critical as the first programs, the programs in a prior category? If the answer to that question is everything is critical, I think that many of the other departments could make the same argument. And their expectation would be once we mitigate one department, some of them would have an expectation that we take the same approach with them. And essentially what happens is we undo the balanced posture that the budget is or will be if the board adopts the recommendations. We would mitigate and basically whittle away at that plan. The second part of the question about the CFCI funding, which the board will deliberate on tomorrow. Originally, the CEO's office intended to recommend to the board funding some key programs using a 5-year CFCI plan because CFCI has carryover. And we were intending to come to the board and recommend a 5-year spending plan. And so essentially that would be creating a structural deficit unless we put the other component in place. So the other component was either the department absorbs the new positions that would have been funded under CFCI over time. They absorb them into their new budget, or the CFCI Advisory Committee absorbs their cost into their new spending plan 5 years from now. Because there's so much uncertainty in what's happening with the budget, our recommendation changed because we feel like we need to slow down the spending to control it as much as possible, and that includes positions for CFCI. And so what we did to strike the right compromise and balance is you'll see in the board letter for tomorrow, we are recommending some positions or some programs be funded with CFCI, but they are not ongoing, they're not programs that need ongoing funding. And so there's, I can't remember, like there's Mill and Vets and, a couple of other departments, but we're not positioning the requests so that we would require ongoing costs, but we're funding them with one-time CFCI funding. That's why we changed the plan.
Okay, I know that to the last point, I would say I understand our policy is not to fund positions with one-time. 5 years, I think, is different, especially given sort of an outlook of where we stand today and 5 years from now. But I think I hear you, but I also want us to take that into account because that is a way that we can address what I think is a critical concern. I want to go back to where you started, though. You identified that 32 are proposed to be cut, but 27, was it, are being funded through? So is that a net loss of 5?
That is correct.
Okay, so overall, that's the proposed, that will be the proposed impact based on this budget.
That is correct. So they have positions that are that will be funded under the Juvenile Justice Realignment Block Grant.
So those
Measure
aren't
A.
positions they've already had and are continuing with those funds. They are new.
These should be new positions because this funding in many ways is restricted. And so, for example, the funding from the Juvenile Justice Block Grant, it's for secure youth treatment facility programs. We're adding Deputy Public Defender 3 and 2 Psychiatric Social Worker 2s. And so what we'll have to do is we'll work with them to impact the curtailments that we want to implement and then add these positions.
Okay,
Because the positions that are being curtailed are vacant. And so we're taking vacant positions and then we're adding new positions at the same time.
okay. I think that's something, I don't think I'll be the only board member watching that, but helpful to hear how you see it from where you sit today. And I know that we'll continue to hear engagement on this topic because I know it's a concern. I will also say that as we look at how we proceed, I know a big part of our budget conversation going forward looks at the issue of backfill, and we have a county policy to not backfill. And so I raised that here, but it's also my understanding that the county policy addresses as it relates to both health and safety, which are critical services that the county must provide. And so especially for our public health departments, especially as we are seeing challenges with safety and the critical role that everyone involved in a safety role has in providing that community safety now, I just want to make sure that we are continuing to keep that in mind as we are looking at our budget too. And I would ask that you work with our departments to find solutions to the best of our ability, recognizing the challenges that we have. Again, as we've stated, overall our budget is balanced, but we're facing obstacles. And these challenges will continue, including, and we will have to address them, including ensuring that our workforce is supported, that we meet our legally obligated settlements, and that we continue to support our most vulnerable communities, especially at a time such as this. So I look forward to continuing our work on the budget as we move forward into supplemental budget phase. And these are some of the areas that we will be paying close attention to, and I would ask that you continue to work on.
Supervisor, my team just gave me the more precise information. Of the 27, 18 are new. 18 are new positions. And then, so they're getting 27 total. 18 are new, and 9 is funding for existing positions.
And does that include cuts that are proposed in supplemental?
So no, so 27 new positions, and then 32 that are cut in recommend as part of the 3%, right? Yes. So let me, for clarity, so 32 positions cut as part of the 3% curtailment from recommended budget. The reason why they didn't happen in recommended budget is we needed more time to work with the public defender on their curtailment plan. So most other departments took their cut in recommended budget. We're taking these curtailments in final changes. At the same time, we are adding funding for 27 positions. 18 are new, and then 9 is for existing positions. Then in supplemental, we will implement, not just for this department, for all the departments, the additional 5.5% curtailment.
Okay.
And I think the point to be made here, it's a very nuanced point. The 27 positions are not your unrestricted NCC. The 5.5% that we're looking for in supplemental will be NCC. So it's a different funding source. And I guess that's my way of trying to say, from where I sit today, I do not anticipate any impacts to these funding sources for those positions.
And I understand the funding source matters in terms of how we're talking about our budget, but the ultimate effect of implementing these cuts, no matter what the funding source is really what I'm trying to address. And so making sure that we're looking at these departmental proposals and changes with that in mind, I think is important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Hahn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Supervisor Mitchell kind of setting the tone, but I'm mad too. I think that's a good feeling, that we're all having. And I also was thinking about what you said, how we as the county are really that last and final resort for people to keep them from falling through the cracks of their lives. And I know we think about it every year in December when we gather to bury the unclaimed dead, and sometimes it's anywhere from 1,000 to 1,600. The number varies, and I know every year somebody, either one of our ecumenical faith leaders or one of us, we always say, our goal should be maybe we can find them earlier. Maybe we can find them, catch them, and keep them from sort of ending up here where they're alone and no one loves them. And I think that is so what the county does. And sometimes when we find these lost souls, it's through our libraries, it's through our parks, certainly. I think probably some young people have been saved in our swimming programs. And I really think, and I know a lot of us are focused on our public defender and alternate public defender, certainly they're at the forefront of kind of helping to save people who have no other recourse and who sometimes feel like the system is stacked against them. And it's certainly our social workers. I mean, that's sort of our goal. And it's frustrating this year that so much of what we believe constitutes that safety net, we're having to, the net is being torn in a lot of places, and because of the challenges. And I think we're clear on how challenged we are this year for all the reasons that you mentioned, Fesia. We have declining revenues, we have increasing obligations, and we have these awful record-breaking settlements. And before I go on, thank you, Fesia, and your team, and thank you, department heads, for coming here today and listening and showing up. And not just today, but thank you all for showing up every single day and leading your departments to do just what this board, attempts to do, which is clearly to provide the kind of living for our over 10 million residents that really gives them a quality of life that we all strive to make sure LA County is that place. And it's frustrating to see us, deleting positions, scaling back public services, particularly against the backdrop of increasingly hostile federal administration that we're seeing right now. And I know fiscal responsibility is the North Star for our board. It's critical that we don't spend money we don't have, but I'm concerned and continued cuts to our programs and services are eroding our ability to provide that safety net that keeps our most vulnerable fed, housed, out of harm's way. And while on one hand it is gratifying that our eliminating positions are vacant, so we're not laying folks off, which is good. But I'm concerned that some of these deletions are not impacting all of our departments equally. And some of the positions have been vacant well over a year, sometimes two. And at that point, we kind of all agree, wow, you haven't been able to fill that. You didn't really make the effort to hire. Okay, you lose that. But for instance, the public defender's office, right? Those 32 positions were not long-time vacancies. They just became vacant a few months ago, and it's my understanding the department was in the process of filling them. And so I'm really trying to follow your deleting 32, adding 27, but the 27, just to be clear, are the restricted, they are paid for by restricted. So I get that, and I think you're confident in that revenue source. But that also impacts the department's ability to perform the services they need by taking away the 32 that they were kind of leaning into and replacing them sort of with these 27. And I will say that this reminds me a little, the environment that we're living in reminds me a little bit of 2020 when we were talking about meeting the moment. And I remember not voting for that budget on the first time it came through, sending gasps throughout the auditorium because I didn't feel like it met the moment. And this one too, particularly as it relates to our public defender, I feel like we have a moment out there where we're seeing people in our communities every single day being swept up, kidnapped, crying out from the back of a van, needing help, needing counsel, needing representation. And so for me, it feels like the moment we should have leaned in more to our public defender and alternate public defender. And I know some of the restricted positions that sounded like related to juvenile, but I do know that, I've watched our public defender as it relates to our young people, particularly in Los Padrinos. Many of these young people are at the cuspis of their lives. Like they're either going to go, many of them are in these transfer hearings, right? They're either going to go to men's central jail, which in my opinion ends all possibility of second and third chances and rehabilitation, or because of the work of our public defender, they're able to make the case to keep them in juvenile and give them opportunities like Pine Grove. So it's like the DA on one hand has got his DAs in there trying to send them to jail, and our public defender is in there trying to look at them as human beings and give them a second chance. So, I know we're going to talk about it tomorrow. I think my staff was also very concerned that the money that was allotted was then taken away after it went through cluster. And so I think everybody's a little bit upset about that. And we can talk about that tomorrow. But I think you're hearing from some of us that if there's any way at this moment, when it does seem like our most vulnerable could use a good public defender or ultimate public defender, we seem to be taking away what we'd like to see them. So any other way you can be creative there, I think that would be better, meeting this moment. Because really, a lot of this, when we talk about this budget and the challenges, that was before we had these unprecedented raids coming into our communities, and the unprecedented, by the way, impact, which I think we're going to get a report back on, what is that's going to have on our economy in LA County. So these folks are going to need our help more than ever. So the other thing that I was sad about was seeing that the funding for our extended aquatic season has been reversed and eliminated, rather than reverting to one-time funding as some other programs were. And this was something our residents had been asking for a long time. Gee, the hottest months are not June, but it ends up being October in September and October. And so it was really gratifying that we figured out how to do that last year. We hired local, you know, young people for our lifeguards, and it really was a positive program. You know, this is a healthy activity. Families participated in this. And when it's super hot and there's nothing else to do, we know that sometimes has adverse outcomes and consequences. So I wanted to acknowledge Norma Garcia for her team's creativity within their own budget to cobble together enough funding to safely close our parks with 2 staffers. But I understand part of that solution is closing some of the parks during the week, which is not going to be welcome news to our residents. But I'm just sorry that we weren't able to figure out something more creatively to add 2 more months to our swimming, to jobs with these lifeguards. So, and I know that we were on track to hire these lifeguards. We were kind of on track to do this extended season until it got slashed. So I hope we can maybe, I mean, by the supplemental, that would be too late, but if there's anything else we could do, and maybe I was just gonna ask you, I was trying to figure it out. Do you know offhand how much money we're talking about for the limited number of pools in the county to keep them open 2 more months? Do you know that number offhand? You may not. I couldn't figure it out.
I thought it was a couple of million. I'll have my
know, it's-
team. So 5 for the full program. 5 million for the extended season.
For yeah, and do you know how many pools that is? How many pools?
For looking.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of pools that are year-round anyway, and they have escaped this, I believe, if they're year-round pools. But I do think the extended, and I know, I mean, it's everything's significant, but this is such an important, when we're taking away so much else, I think figuring out if there's any way we can figure that out, I would be very grateful, and I know our residents would appreciate it, keeping them open during the hottest time of the year. So
Supervisors, it's 23 seasonal pools.
23, when you say seasonal, you
I
mean?
think they're not, that means that they're not normally open year-round.
Okay.
So that would be for 23 pools.
Yeah, and they're pretty much spread throughout all of our districts.
Yes.
Yeah, again, I just really think, you know, people have limited opportunities when it gets to those really hot months, and this has been such an incredible program that we've given people a little place to cool off, a little place to gather with your family, and sometimes in the evenings. So I would try to see if this was something we could restore. So I agree, this is a budget that I don't like, and I don't think anybody does, but I know this is a budget, Fuchsia, that will put us, won't put us in the hole as we move forward, which I know is important, but it just seems like sometimes we can be creative, and I've seen us be creative, and I would just mention the one thing about the swimming pools. And my staff had me one more question about the public defender. Why wasn't the public defender allowed to use salary savings to achieve their initial curtailment?
Yeah, so we've received that request from a number of departments. In a nutshell, what I would say is salary savings is the wrong tool for the type of problem we're trying to resolve. What we are trying to do is reduce our costs. What salary savings does is you keep the same number of costs, but it allows you to generate savings. What we want to do is reduce our costs. As part of our AB 218 financing plan, we are going to need to implement this plan over 5 years, and then we're going to pay debt on it for 20 years. So I need a 25-year solution. Salary savings requires us to work with the department and ensure that they do not fill the positions that they have committed to not filling. And so rather than us being able to bank that we know that the savings are going to be there, it's a year-by-year serial process. That's what I would say, number one. Number two, salary savings, if you keep the positions on the book, then it generates another unintended consequence. So we know that our labor partners under AB 2561 will be coming to the board for departments that have a certain number of vacancies, and there will be pressure to fill those vacancies. And then we'll have to continually explain the narrative, like these vacancies aren't real, because we need to keep them vacant for 25 years.
I mean, I appreciate that. I don't feel like anything you just said is not something that you could work out with the department.
Well,
sounds like there's like a little trust thing there.
well, I mean, we have to ensure that it's going to happen. Actually, I'll share this with the board. I think it was in 2008, 2009.
Ooh, was there a department that said they weren't going to, and they snuck behind you?
Yes. Well, I don't want to say sneak. No, I'm not using those words.
To hire somebody?
I'm not using those words. What I'm saying is we tried this previously, and it was the public defender that consistently advocated for filling the positions that we had agreed to hold vacant for salary savings during a prior economic crisis. So it's precedent setting, and so once we do it for one department, then we're doing it for all the other departments. What it really does, Supervisor, at the end of the day, is it also takes up a bunch of time, because now we're working, instead of knowing that we've just reduced the cost, we've eliminated it. We can take the funding and bank on it for the next 25 years.
Again, I hear you. It just seems like, can be worked out, and these curtailments were unprecedented, and it had a lot to do with our contract that we were negotiating. But I think some of those things might have worked out with more communication with the department.
Well,
and you can't blame the department just because the advocates show up and demand certain things either.
Absolutely.
That's not always their fault.
And so it's the added pressure. So if we were to do this, there would be added pressure from the advocates, from labor. They're looking at the vacancies on the book. Potentially, we would be back here having a discussion of why aren't we filling these positions, rather than just banking a savings now.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And as I was listening to the line of questions and comments, it is accurate when Supervisor Mitchell said that we are the safety net. Everything that we are talking about affects, whether it be parks or health, quality of life issues in this county. We are, in many instances, especially with open space, the only place that people can go to escape life right now. With that, Feezy, I want to thank you for your presentation. I also want to thank your team, including your Chief Deputy, Joe Nikita, and your budget team under the leadership of Mason Matthews, as well as my staff, Michelle Vega, and all the budget deputies on the 8th floor. I also want to recognize our department leaders who have had to go through a very difficult process of identifying curtailments for their respective organizations to meet the county's upcoming financial obligations. I know I talked to one department head who, when they announced the cuts that were going to take place, the staff got emotional. And it wasn't because their jobs are being cut, it's because they recognize the level of services that they provide and the impact it's going to have on the people that they serve each and every day. And that was in Parks and Rec. And I don't know if Norma is out there in the audience, but I saw firsthand the work that they did after the fires, opening up camps and having their staff come. Many who were working well beyond a full day to make it happen. And so I know that the commitment that they have and the level of commitment they have goes beyond just their paycheck. They recognize that the people that come and use their services are really a part of their family now, as it relates to especially the youth that we put in place. This year, we keep saying it, but we are facing massive legal liabilities brought on by AB 218.
wildfire recovery efforts, much lower property tax growth, and what we know are imminent mass federal funding cuts. Something Supervisor Solis, you touched on. I think the most frustrating part of this discussion is we don't know what we don't know. And so when we're building a budget, which we have to do by July 1st, we're building a budget based on uncertainty. So what we're talking about today in terms of curtailments could be deeper. We do not know. And that is very frightening. It's frightening for us as a board, but it's also frightening for the public, who depends upon everything that we do. The county reached a tentative agreement with SEIU on salaries and fringe benefits for the next 3 years. This agreement is a reflection of our continued partnership with labor to ensure that best services to LA County residents, especially during this period of great uncertainty. But I remind everyone that we also have upcoming negotiations. Supervisor Mitchell touched on 2015, our IHSS workers, as well as our other labor partners. So this is only one, albeit the largest, but one of many, well, 2015 is larger, but one of many that we still have to negotiate. And when I hear, looking to increase fees, I would remind us that the very people that we're serving are facing the same difficulties as it relates to the cost of living in this county. And so I appreciate Supervisor Horvath thinking outside the box, but I know that increasing fees sometimes can have unintended consequences for the very people that we want to support and help. Although we've taken a meaningful step forward on labor negotiations, we must continue to make difficult but necessary decisions to safeguard our essential services for the future to maintain our high credit rating. This means we shall continue to identify the impacts of federal funding changes while navigating on a austere budget, ensuring the county maintains a strong social safety net. I am proud to see the county budget recommendations continue to address critical and crucial issues in mental health, homelessness, and public safety. However, it reflects some difficult trade-offs that I want to be clear about. Funding for our Parks Department will be down by $22.2 million. Residents are already seeing changes to park hours and staffing, and I'm sure we're all getting the emails and letters, impacting their ability to participate in core programming, serving our youth, families, and adults. Additionally, the Office of Emergency Management will not receive additional investments this year to improve capacity. I've never really realized how important the Office of Emergency Management is until working on COVID and then working on the fires. They were truly the navigators that related to trying to look at how the resources are getting out there and communication to our residents. Also not included in the budget is additional funding meant to improve our mental health services in our jails. As a county, we won't be able to invest $18.7 million in additional funding for our integrated correctional health services, a critical service to safely transport individuals with serious health needs. We also had a shift of ongoing revenues and instead utilized one-time funding for several programs. This includes the PLACE program, which provides a pathway for county careers, and the Department of Arts and Culture's Organizational Grants program. While these changes are not easy, we are avoiding a fiscal cliff that could place the county in an even more precarious position. That is why I continue to advocate for financial restraint to avoid a structural deficit. Doing so will put the county in a better position to ensure our most vulnerable residents are not impacted by these ongoing costs. Public safety, mental health, and housing and homeless continue to be my key priorities, and today's budget demonstrates forward progress in some of these areas. I am pleased to see the recommendation to include $152 million in Measure E revenue to support the fire department's critical needs, including improving their equipment and systems. Mental health continues to be a top concern of the county, especially as residents continue to face hardship. I appreciate the $55.6 million in one-time Mental Health Services Act funding to the Department of Mental Health, and I want to thank you, Dr. Lisa Wong, and your team for the services that you provide, recognizing you are doing a lot. While 55.6 is a lot, you could use triple that to address the needs in the community. So thank you and your team for the work that you do. This also includes capital improvements for existing adult and senior care facilities and capital subsidies for Home Key Plus programs. With the county jail serving as one of the largest mental care services in the nation, something that just really does break my heart, we must focus efforts on improving correctional health services for those in our care. We have a moral and ethical obligation to do this. Because of that, I was happy to see that we are working to replace an aging network equipment in jail facilities with $7.8 million for the Sheriff's Department. I'm also encouraged to see money allocated to support new positions for the SYTF, the Secure Youth Treatment Facility Youth Support Program. This will fund legal representation for youth to obtain diversion and access to individualized treatment, education, housing, employment, and mental health care for our vulnerable, justice-involved youth. We are also prioritizing the continued housing and supportive services needs of our residents experiencing homelessness by including more than $150 million in Measure H funds for Pathway Home, the Skid Row Action Plan, interim housing, and lived experience integration. I will continue to advocate for the county to consider additional opportunities to support our public safety partners to protect our residents so they can fully enjoy the benefits of all the services that we provide. I want to end on the note that I am proud of the resiliency and the dedication of the entire county family, especially during a time when residents are already experiencing immense distress. While there is much uncertainty, I remain laser focused on prioritizing essential government services and providing sustainable safety net for our most vulnerable community members throughout the county. And I would point out to our department heads, each one of you provides a very, very important and valuable service. And while I appreciate that everyone can make an argument as to why the curtailments are going to negatively impact the services that they do, this was across the board. The curtailments, and Fizia, correct me if I'm wrong, the curtailments that you required the departments to do was across the board? Were the curtailments that you required, the 3%, was that across the board? Turn on your mic.
That was for most department supervisors. There were
So how did you determine who would not fall into that category?
So we figured out the number that we needed, and then we know some departments, for example, like the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department still comes in each year with a deficit. And so in order for them to contribute in a meaningful way, they would have to actually cut field positions, not just vacancies. So they have vacancies, but they still have a deficit. They would have to cut field positions. First, they would have to cut enough to fill their deficit number. Then they would have to cut additional positions to bring in a positive number to contribute to what we were looking for the curtailments. The other departments are departments that were instrumental in the fire recovery, which are Public Works and Regional Planning. And then the last department was the assessor. Assessor essentially is the revenue generator for the county. And so although we know we're going to experience, or we anticipate that we're going to experience a couple of years where we don't see an increase in our revenue growth, we need them to get staff on board so that they can get their assessors trained as quickly as possible so they can assess as many properties as possible to bring in additional revenue.
By not requiring those departments to take that 3%, did that put undue impact on other departments to make up for that? Or did you have a dollar amount that you set out and then came up with a 3%? Or how did that come to be? Because when I hear, and believe me, we've all gotten letters from different department heads asking for us to advocate for them.
Yeah.
And I just want to understand how we're going to triage that, because I think each one of us can make an argument. I mean, I talked about the arts scholarships that I know in my district have been incredible. How are you going to triage that?
Yeah, well, let me give you an example for assessor. Assessor is the revenue generator for the county, one of them. They are the tip of the spear. And so I guess the question comes down to, you can cut assessor and thereby impair your ability to bring on revenue, which would impact every department, or you could not have the assessor take curtailments and then have the remaining departments take a dollar amount. And so in some ways, that question is a very important one. You know, I think the different way to ask it is, why would you cut the revenue generator for the county? Because we know that they bring in revenue. We know that the assessor leaves on the table, and I don't want to get the number wrong, but it's an amount probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars that they could bring on if they did have additional staff. But because of the budgetary pressures, and there are so many demands on the budget every year, we're only able to provide the assessor a few positions at a time.
Thank you for that. And then I don't know if I'm hesitant to invite up the treasurer, tax collector, only because I don't want to put you in the spot, but it would help me to understand, because Supervisor Horvath brought something up, which I agree, health and welfare are important. I'm trying to figure out what criteria our credit rating looks at backfill as it relates to health and welfare. And the reason why I'm asking that is because my greatest fear is that, and by the way, I'm really proud of the team, the credit rating remained in spite of some of the issues as it relates to the $4 billion and all. But the costs associated with downgrading our credit rating would create the need to do more cuts, correct? Or not correct?
So what I would say is the downgrading of the credit rating makes borrowing more expensive.
Exactly, so,
And
we're
then
borrowing.
we have a second piece, because we are about to take out a large amount of debt, you know, let's just say in the billions of dollars. I won't disclose the amount. And so that cost, based on an increased interest rate, on an annual amount, it's an increased cost. And then when you multiply it over 20 years, that's how long we will be paying on the debt for AB 218. It has to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
So, I mean, so is the answer yes, then we'll have to find additional revenue in order to offset or pay for those bonds?
Yes, we will have to identify funding, whether it's existing funding through curtailments, or if we can grow our way out of the problem with additional revenue.
Which I'm
the
hoping
additional
will
revenue
happen.
would help.
I'm hoping that the tides will turn in the next 3 years, but you can't assume.
Yeah. So we need two things. We need the tides to turn, but even if they don't, we are still, I think we're still, based on the assessor's prior presentations and his budget presentation, we're still leaving money on the table right now.
So I would ask then that we get clarification in terms of what would trigger backfill, because based on the line of questioning, my sense is that this discussion is not over. And I think it's important for us, especially with our bond rating. I think it was S&P or Moody's, maybe. It was Moody's that was very point blank.
Yes, it was Moody's.
Asking about that. So I think it's important for us to understand what would trigger that discussion or that downgrade, because I really do believe that it speaks volumes, not just to them, but to all of us, that we did not get downgraded, given the fact they knew that we're still negotiating with the union, given the fact that we are settling on a $4 billion lawsuit, and yet they still maintain, and that's a reflection not only of the departments, but also of this board, because they also look at how we operate with our budget. And so, it's something that I think we should be proud of, but also recognize we have to be cautious.
Absolutely. I'll just say this one thing, Supervisor. Budget letters are sometimes difficult to read. They're not the most interesting. There's a lot of numbers and acronyms. Part of the reason why we painstakingly include all of that detail is because we want people to know, like rating agencies, how we're funding things. What they are very interested in is what we do with our local dollars. And so every opportunity we can in our budget letter will say, this is NCC. And then when it's not our locally generated revenue, if it's an outside revenue source, MHSA, Measure A, Measure E, we also point that out because we want to demonstrate to them and others, here's what we're doing with the NCC. Those are the funds that the board can control. And so we made a statement in my presentation and in the board letter. None of these positions that are being funded in this budget phase are being funded with local dollars. So to your point, we're trying to be transparent and message to folks who are interested in that level of detail what we're doing.
Thank you. Supervisor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on a comment that Madam CEO made in response to Supervisor Horvath. First of all, let me say that I believe you have been as creative as you could be given the circumstances. I understand blood doesn't come from a turnip. I get that. I also understand kind of the general budgeting exercise and that you can't cut your revenue generating sources. I get that. The question for me, however, is you made a comment in response to Supervisor Horvath that you needed to exercise a balanced approach to the curtailments. And so I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about that, because even within a budgeting exercise, when you protect your revenue generating departments, because we are the safety net level of government, because we know that there are communities and families who will experience a compounded reality because they qualify for multiple programs that the county operates, and so they will have a disproportionate experience based on our cuts. You've heard from examples we've all given. Parks After Dark, I talked about the regional parks. We talked about the HIV cuts. DPSS curtailments as an example. I understand that they are facing the difficult decision of reducing call center hours. Well, with the state reinstating asset tests, that's going to put an extra burden on call centers because people are now, the asset test was alleviated for a couple years. So people are now going to have to do quarterly asset tests to continue to qualify for Medi-Cal. And so call centers will probably have more workload. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So help me understand, because I just have to say, from a budgetary philosophical perspective, I think kind of across the board strategies, particularly at this level of government, is not smartest. We may have to agree to disagree on that. So when you say a balanced approach to curtailments, help me understand your theory and your thinking on that.
So I think there are a couple of things. First of all, we try to solve for the problem. And let's just say in this case, it's a number. We try to figure out, what that number is. And back in November of last year, we asked the departments to do a 3%, a 5%, or we had them do multiple curtailment scenarios. This is before the fires, before the change in federal policy, before the ICE raids, before we finalized AB 218. Because of the amount of time that it takes to pull together a curtailment plan, what we do is we ask the departments, we don't dictate what the plan should be. We ask the departments, tell us, what your 3% curtailment looks like. We had a few departments that gave us curtailment plans that were not workable, and so in that they would not have generated savings or would not have cut costs, and so we rejected those. I understand your point that treating each department equally could result in inequity. And part of that inequity is compounded by things that we think that's on the horizon are things that are beyond our control. And so what I would say to that is in future budget phases, I mean, there are some things we think we know what the state is going to do, but today we don't, right? We hope that they would, pass their budget in a timely fashion, but, it's possible that that may not happen. And so sometimes we are planning for something that we may or may not happen. Unfortunately for us, we don't have a lot of time to take into all of those factors and then pivot and adjust, pivot and adjust, pivot and adjust. We've been pivoting, I feel like, since November. We've gone through numerous scenarios on a number of our obligations. And so I'm mindful of the point that you're making. My hope is as we work with departments that they consider those things as well. And then have, when we do our internal budget presentations, that we're having a conversation about that. The last thing that I will say is the CEO's office is working on a new budgeting system that will provide more insight into departmental budgets and other budget units than we probably have ever had before. And the hope is that tool, that new budgeting tool, will allow us to look at some of the very things that you are raising, not necessarily the outside forces. Right. Like I can't account for that. Right. But we can look at programs that are touted as, very popular, and then we will be able to see, tell us how much of your unspent fund balance at the end of the year was attributable to this particular program, and let's have a discussion about why. And I think the ability to have those discussions and have that amount of data and granularity helps produce more thoughtful plans across the board.
I appreciate that, because I think the additional data will continue to help inform, I think, your department heads as well as us. And I think the kind of global kind of statement I just wanted to make is, just as you talked about, it's counterintuitive to cut revenue generating units. I would hope that this board would send as clear a message, just like our Cares First, Jails Last culture, that our culture would be to acknowledge that we're asking our department heads and you to use the scalpel to be really clear about what our core functions are as the provider of last resort, as the safety net level of government, and that be front of mind as you, with this additional data, go through to figure out what we should cut and what must be protected, just as revenue generating units are, just as you said, the sheriff, because they don't have unfilled positions, just like those kind of philosophies are held on high. I hope acknowledging that we are the level of government we are will also be held front and center.
And just a quick clarification, the Sheriff's Department does have unfilled positions, but in order for us to realize real revenue, their curtailment plan would have to include filled positions.
Thank you. Now we will proceed with public comment on budget items. Before we begin, Executive Officer, please read the call-in information and explain the speaking rules.
Good morning, members of the public. If you wish to participate in public comment, you may do so in person or remotely, as indicated on the agenda. To join remotely, please call 877-692-8955 and use participant code number 4433663. You will receive up to 90 seconds to address the board on all budget items. Please clearly state your name and note once your time has expired. We will immediately move to the next speaker. For members of the public joining us remotely, promptly press 1, then 0 to be moved from the listening queue to the speaking queue on these items. Remember to turn down the volume on your device as soon as the moderator calls on you, or there will be an echo. If you muted your microphone, please remember to unmute when you are called upon. To ensure we hear from both in-person and telephonic speakers, we will alternate between the two speaking queues. Members of the public who are in attendance, when you hear or see your name displayed on the screen, Please come down to the front of the boardroom and staff will assist you. Please do not approach the podium until directed to do so.
We will now call in-person speakers, and while they are coming forward, we will take telephonic speakers. This will be public comment on all budget items 1 through 5. Will the following individuals please come forward and staff will assist you? Bambi Salcedo, Byron Jose, Hadir Azab, L.A. Byron, Loretta Lorraine, Maya Daniels, Vanessa Melendres, and Yesenia Cox. Moderator, can we have the first remote speaker, please?
Our first participant is Eric Previn. Your line is open. If you are muted, please unmute and speak directly into your phone. You may begin.
Thank you very much. It's Eric Previn from Studio City, and this will be a comment about our values, because it isn't just a funding issue. This is sort of a moral issue. And by the way, thanks to all the supervisors for those touching remarks about the safety net. Very, very important and deeply moving. But listen, we have the Marina Del Rey. Okay, this brings in excess of $50 million a year from leaseholds. Just two that are on the disclosure today, Neptune Marina and PCH Beach Associates, brought in an extra $160,000. What a great start to getting the parks open. Okay, because I want to make it clear. I think Khan was on this a little bit about the pools. We have to start at the ground level where the people are. We have to open parks, okay? Staffing Magic Johnson Park and Wishing Tree is critical. Now, of course, the Olympics, which are not mentioned in your budget, dropped. LA 28 gave us $160 million. I don't know who exactly for swim lessons. Terrific. How about we get Caruso, who's a lessee, and the other big, fat, and I mean that in the nice way, lessees in the marina who have made hand over fist so much money, maybe they could put together a kind of a philanthropic approach. And maybe we could get the guys from American Golf, who are doing such a great job with the revenue over on 13 of the 20 golf courses run by Wesley and whatever it's called.
Next speaker, please.
It's too upsetting.
Ray Humphreys, your line is open. You may begin.
It's actually Roy, but you can call me Ray Humphreys here, Rolling Heights, California. And actually, item 5 kind of sums it all up, because the county and state deserve what they get. All of this stuff was foreseeable, as we have the left-wing fascist arrogance with perversion and racism of this board, with special thanks to Supervisor Mitchell and Solis. Fiscal negligence for decades exacerbate the spending of dollars on illegal aliens/migrants for decades, and the Biden invasion. The gang of 4 Democrat Party assassins, perverse child molesters, Alcatraz awaits you. BLM is a disgrace in spending money on, geez, God bless America, God bless Donald Trump, and protect him.
Can you please direct your comments regarding the budget, please?
This all goes around to the budget, you're spending, Jesus.
Thank you.
Shannon Camacho, your line is open. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Shannon Camacho, and I'm with Inclusive Action for the City. Inclusive Action is an economic justice nonprofit and CDFI that serves and advocates along small businesses and micro-entrepreneurs such as street vendors. Inclusive Action is also one of the co-chair organizations of the Immigrants RLA Coalition. We appreciate the board's collaboration with our coalition and the time you've spent hearing from our immigrant communities this year, but this proposed budget does not meet the moment. Our immigrant communities and their families are in dire circumstances due to the attacks from DHS. Our communities are unable to work and are going to struggle for years to be able to pay rent, access food, and other resources. Small businesses are losing workers overnight. Street vendors are scared to set up shop and work outside, and youth are having to step in to support their parents after their parent is detained. The economic fallout is already here, and our most vulnerable workers and entrepreneurs are the ones feeling it first. IRLA includes organizations that work directly with street vendors and immigrant entrepreneurs across the county, and many are the sole providers for their families and can't access traditional relief sources. Our communities need critical resources, and we are glad that the recent motions have been made to DCBA and DEO to support immigrants that have been affected by these attacks, but we also need to see long-term permanent programs and services for immigrants in LA County. Right now, immigrant families are facing rising rent, fear of deportation, and exclusion from critical social services programs. Housing is still the number one concern
Next speaker,
that we've
please.
heard across all five.
Miriam Rich, your line is open. You may begin.
Please begin.
Good morning. My name is Megan, I'm a community engagement intern with La Defensa. I'm here today to speak on the budget and to urge the county to invest in real community safety through care, not punishment. First, I want to speak to the alarming coordination between the Sheriff's Department and ICE. The Los Angeles community is already under so much stress, and seeing LASD support ICE raids, blocking protests, and helping target immigrant families is unacceptable. Second, I want to highlight the need to restore funding for the Public Defender's Office. Cutting their budget while increasing funding for law enforcement sends the wrong message about our county's priorities. Finally, I urge you to take a hard look at the Probation Department's budget. They cost Los Angeles County billions in settlements from abuse cases, yet they continue to hold on to funding for vacant positions. That money should go where it's actually needed, like youth services, housing, and care-based programs that keep our communities safe and whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
B. Curiel, your line is open. You may begin.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is B. Curiel, serving as a manager of training and policy with the Trans-Latino Coalition. This budget season, I do want to thank you, Supervisors, for voting in favor of the TGIW and for its speedy implementation process. Your ability to find the time to speak and truly listen to your constituents is seen and not taken for granted. I do want to emphasize the vulnerability that TGI youth and aging populations are in terms of needing housing and just negative health outcomes with the TGIW. I really appreciate your support. I also want to speak in support of CFCI, the Care First Community Investment. I've seen these funds help people be housed and help people be connected to mentorship opportunities that lead to more support. So I just really want to emphasize the need for this type of care and community first investment for our community members. I do want to just thank and thankful for you to really see the need in these efforts to support our communities. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yaritza Gonzalez, your line is open. You may begin.
Good morning. My name is Yaritza Gonzalez, and I'm here with Garrison, the Central American Research Center, and IRLA, the Immigrants RLA Coalition. We appreciate your ongoing collaboration with our coalition and the time you've spent hearing from immigrant communities this year. But this proposed budget does not meet the moment. As a legal service provider, Garrison supports the immigrant community through programs like Represent LA, which funds critical legal services. We appreciate the $5.5 million that has been allocated to Represent LA, but it is crucial that the county increase funding to $6 million to meet the increased demand for legal services. It is especially important during this time when immigrants continue to face threats of mass deportations from the current administration. Also, we urge you to support undocumented seniors with a guaranteed income and invest $12 million to launch an expanded BREATHE program, protect immigrant workers with $2 million for the new Worker Justice Fund, and prevent homelessness by investing $20 million for the sub-program under the Flexible Housing Subsidy Pool to help immigrant families stay housed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mary Cody, your line is open. You may begin.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Mary Ellen with Cheerless, speaking on behalf of Immigrants RLA, a coalition of over 100 immigrant-serving organizations. We appreciate your ongoing collaboration with our coalition and the time you spent hearing from our immigrant communities this year. But this proposed budget simply is not responsive to the current social and political landscape. Immigrants are facing an attack on multiple fronts. While the federal administration militarizes our neighborhoods, immigrants fear deportation, and this is all against a backdrop of rising rent in Los Angeles and exclusion from critical programs. Housing is still the #1 concern reported across all 5 districts, and that's why IRLA is calling for a $20 million expansion to the Flexible Housing Subsidy Pool to reach immigrants who are locked out of federal and state aid. We also urge you to fund a guaranteed basic income pilot for older immigrants aging without a safety net. These are longtime community members who deserve dignity and stability. Immigrants power Los Angeles, and the budget must reflect our support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Madam Chair, there are no other remote speakers in the queue to address the board.
Thank you. We will now go to in-person speakers. Please begin.
My name is Maya Daniels. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the policy associate with the Trans-Latina Coalition. We first want to say that we're thankful to those in the county that sincerely see that the fight for equity, racial justice, and LGBTQIA+ rights are all connected, and wish for the TGI people to build capacity to accurately address the issues impacting our communities. The TGI community, transgender, gender expansive, and intersex, has long faced challenges and discrimination, and now more than ever, with blatant intolerance and hate brewing, it is essential that we raise awareness and stand in solidarity against hate. I also represent the Trans-Latina Coalition as a co-chair for Immigrants RLA. This budget must meet the moment and respond to the immigrant housing crisis that is only being intensified by the ongoing ICE raids and federal hostility. IRLA is calling for immediate and tangible investment in housing and guaranteed income for immigrants. At this time, supporting immigrant families overcome housing insecurity and creating for them a safety net is one of our leading priorities. Thank you to the board and county departments for collaborating with IRLA and immigrant-serving organizations over the past year. Our coalition and the immigrant community we serve stands ready to support implementation, participate in stakeholder sessions, and help shape an effective response that protects our immigrant Angelinos. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, greetings, beautiful and amazing people. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here before you. My name is Bambi Salcedo, and I do have the privilege to be the president and the CEO of the Trans-Latino Coalition, which is the biggest translator organization in the United States. We're so grateful to be here and to thank you. Thank you for being intentional in your work. I know that it is really hard to make decisions that impact the lives of people, but I do want to appreciate the fact that all of you made possible the TGI We under the leadership of Lindsay, our Supervisor Horvath. I also want to uplift and highlight the importance of supporting immigrant communities, and thank you so much for also supporting the Immigrants RLA Coalition and the work that we're all doing. The Trans-Latino Coalition is one of the 6 organizations that is leading this work, and as you know, everything that is happening right now, trans people is also impacted. I can tell you that at least 6 of our clients have been picked up by ICE during their appointments, during their court hearings. And so this is a real issue that impacts our community as well. And I just want to take this time, this moment to say thank you once again so much for being you and for being part of our
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Take a picture. Do that. Okay, you already know I'm Miss Loretta Lorraine. I'm the mother of all the transgenders. I'm wearing the Salvador flag on me. I'm gonna wear all the nations because I have so many children from all nations. I do want to have a meeting with you, Hunt and Miss Lindsley, person to person. I call your office, but your people always put me on hold. Miss Mitchell, I had to thank you. I had to thank all of y'all for doing so much job. I always support Miss Bambi because Miss Bambi buried people. I've seen a girl that just got her citizenship and was murdered a week after that. And Miss Bambi's always been there with all colors and all shapes because people, I wouldn't be here because I keep it real. If you pissed me off, I would tell you because I'm old school like you over there. And I love it. I love the realness. I love what we represent. I'm from the United States. It's nonsense what this president's doing to us because it's really nonsense. I was born here in the USA. I'm Puerto Rican and Creole, and I'm proud of that. But I am so upset at our administration that we have this fool in office. But it's all right because we're going to overcome this. We have to all come together and make a difference. That's why I'm here with Ms. Bambi Lacido, because she has buried Russian girls, Mexican girls from Guatemala, African, American, African, everybody from all nations, and I'm here for all of you, and I love you. I want to have a meeting with you and you, not with your second hands, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, Byron Jose with the Trans-Latina Coalition and Reimagine LA. Thank you to the
Center for Health Equity in the Department of Public Health for advancing the TGI Wellness and Equity Initiative approved by this board. Similarly, with the Two-Spirit TGI unit within CDPH, we're really glad to see both our state and our county truly step up, truly make sure that there's an equitable investment and that its budget reflects its value of inclusivity and equity. So thank you for advancing that work. CEO Davenport, please bore us with the details. We definitely love to hear how your office kind of like calculates where our taxpayers go and how your office kind of like shift what gets allocated or not to CFCI. But we'll be here tomorrow, so we'll have that conversation. We definitely look forward to this board to continue to advance initiatives that are life-sustaining, but also life-affirming, specifically as we continue to see cuts at the federal level. And we also look forward to working with your staffers and your deputies to truly call the City of Los Angeles to partner with this board, to partner with the department to ensure that there's an equitable investment in our communities. Beyond gender-affirming care, beyond housing subsidies, there are different ways that the board continues to ensure that they reflect on our bodies and not just continue to put money to the probation department and to the sheriff's office so we continue to pay out liabilities time and time again and have to cut salaries in departments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. I'm Yesenia Kush with COFEM, the Council of Mexican Federations. We are one of the 6 co-chairs of the Immigrants RLA Coalition. First, I want to thank you for the ongoing collaboration with IRLA and our partner organizations over the past year. Our immigrant communities have shown up at listening sessions, policy and legislative meetings, and countless of LA County hearings to provide public comments. Now the budget must show up for them. This year's budget must meet the moment and respond to the house's crisis, intensified by ICE raids and federal exclusion. Immigrants across all 5 districts continue to voice the same concern: housing. That's why IRLA is calling for a $20 million dedicated for immigrants sub-program under the flexible housing subsidy pool. This investment could prevent homelessness for 6,000 to 8,000 immigrant families who are excluded from other safety nets. Measure A presents a powerful opportunity to do what federal dollars often can't: reach immigrant communities who are consistently left out. We also urge you to fund $12 million for a 2-year guaranteed basic income pilot program to provide $1,000 per month for immigrant seniors aged 65 and older. Across LA County, caregivers, street vendors, day laborers, and small business owners, people who care for our loved ones and power our economy, are being targeted without due process. Like Otto Frank, who hid his family in 1942 during the Holocaust to protect them from persecution, many immigrant families today live with that same fear, afraid to go to war.
Next speaker, please.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Vanessa Melendrez, and I'm with the Filipino Workers Center, and I'm also part of the IRLA Coalition. And I'm just going to uplift some of what they've already said. We also appreciate your ongoing collaboration with our organization and the time that you've already spent hearing us out. But right now, the proposed budget does not meet the moment entirely. Right now, immigrant families are facing rising rent, the obvious fear of deportation, the exclusion from critical programs as well. So housing is still the #1 concern we heard across all 5 districts. And that's why IRLA is calling for $20 million to expand the flexible housing subsidy pool to reach immigrants who are locked out of federal and state aid, as we know. We also urge you to fund, as my colleague mentioned, the Guaranteed Basic Income Pilot Program for older immigrants who are aging without a safety net, but who contribute so much to our economy and our community, as we all know. These are long-time community members who deserve dignity and stability. Immigrants power Los Angeles, and the budget should reflect that as well. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Hadir Azab. I'm with the Council on American Islamic Relations Greater Los Angeles chapter, as well as here representing as one of the co-chairs of Immigrants RLA, and I'm also a resident of District 1 in Chinatown. I want to first thank the board, as my colleagues have previously in the county departments, for working and meeting with IRLA. However, we know, and as you all have said before, that the budget must meet the moment and respond to the current immigrant housing crisis, which we know has been intensified by the ICE raids. We're calling for immediate, tangible investments in housing and guaranteed income for immigrants. Immigrants have shown up to listening sessions, policy meetings, and public comment with your offices, so now the budget must show up for them. Immigrants, especially those who are excluded from state and federal aid, face skyrocketing rents, overcrowding, and growing eviction risks. Specifically, this is why we are calling for what my colleagues mentioned, which is the $20 million flexible housing subsidy pool to reach immigrants who are locked out of federal and state aid, specifically as growing concerns for deportation and main income earners of the households are being kidnapped. Measure A allocations are not finalized yet and may not adequately address this urgent gap. We also urge you to fund the Guaranteed Basic Income pilot for immigrants who are aging without a safety net. Immigrants, as we know, are the core of Los Angeles, and it is our job and your job to make sure that they remain as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Lagos, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of Goodwill Southern California in strong support of continued funding for LA Rise, a life-changing program that provides employment opportunities, stability, and hope to our neighbors experiencing homelessness. We often talk about housing as the solution to homelessness, and yes, stable housing is critical. But what happens next? What happens when someone moves into housing but still has no income, no job, no sense of purpose or security? That's where LA Rise steps in. This program isn't just a temporary fix, it's a workforce development pipeline designed specifically for people who have been left out of the job market. It often offers paid transitional employment, on-the-job training, career coaching, and connections to permanent jobs. Over the past decade, we have served over 1,500 individuals experiencing homelessness and successfully placed over 600 participants into employment. To maximize our impact and stretch every dollar, we consistently braid funding with our AJCCs and workforce centers. This allows us to over-enroll participants, recognizing that given the challenges this population faces, some individuals may disengage or relocate. Nevertheless, our commitment remains to serve as many people as possible with the resources available. Homelessness won't end when shelter alone. It ends when people have a reason to wake up in the morning, a paycheck to support themselves, and a path to long-term independence. So please keep investing in LA Rise and keep believing in the power of work.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's David Gustafson. I'm here on behalf of Goodwill as well. I did go through the LA Rise program. I experienced homelessness. I felt like the system was stacked against me, as you mentioned. I am justice involved as well. I had a lot of barriers that stopped me from getting work. The LA Rise program helped me to get through that. They empowered me to become something better than I thought I could be. Without programs like this, there's a lot that's not gonna change. Even with the homeless services, I went through that. It didn't really help me out. LA Rise did make me a better person. It gave me that opportunity to grow with Goodwill as a company. I became an operations manager, and I'm striving to become a general manager as well. So please keep them in mind. They're a great organization that does help the community. They helped me get off the streets, and I'm a prime example of what can happen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Adriana. I come from the Antelope Valley, Palmdale area, and I'm here supporting IRLA. I would like to talk about the economic relief for impacted communities by the ongoing raids, and also focusing on rental support out in the Antelope Valley. There's a lot of necessity for that right now with a lot of homelessness. The AV is very it's a need right now with renting home. There's a lot of juveniles who are out in the streets as well as veterans. But I would like to have more, how can I say, help out in the community where we live, Palmdale, Lancaster, Cortell, more support for what's going on right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Oscar Iraeta, soy parte de la organización Salva y soy residente del Distrito 5.
Can we get a translator, please?
Oh, I can say in English too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Oscar. I'm part of the Salva organization in District 5, Ms. Barger, and we are collaborating with this amazing coalition, IRLA, And you know what is the necessity in Anilo Valley, especially with the homeless, especially with the access for languages, and the access for just housing. Right now is a crisis over there, so we need you guys just take your time and just know what's the necessity and the solutions that we needed, because at the end of the day, you're gonna take the decision what those families live, what those families suffer right now, so you can probably not make the whole solution, but you can relieve those families. And we're working with them with mental health too. We need more money for that one, especially in the north our country, because we are the last two cities, Panda, Lancaster, and we're working over there hard, try to these families receive the resources that we have here in, especially in LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, that concludes our time for public comment on these items.
Thank you. I see that Supervisor Horvath would like to speak, followed by Supervisor Solis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank everyone who came to speak. I think the testimony has been incredibly moving, and I think highlights why it's important that we have ongoing engagement as we move into supplemental budget phase. We have to make sure that where we are currently falling short, that we are keeping up with whatever the changing landscape looks like, because the stories that we're hearing just highlight what a role the county has to play with the challenges that we're facing and where people are coming for help. And so I appreciate that engagement. We are listening and tracking it, and I hope that communities will stay engaged with us in this dialogue, especially this year, given all of the challenges that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Horvath. Supervisor Solis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to note the immigrant groups that are here. I hope that you are collaborating with the Office of Immigrant Affairs. We have very capable staff that can assist right now, and there are collaborative efforts to get assistance out for people, especially renters that are being evicted. So I would encourage you to do that, and I'm sure my staff will be happy to sit with you, even though we don't represent all of the areas that you geographically mentioned, but we do have the ability to coordinate, and I'm certain that that's something that we're going to continue to do. And I know last Friday, the mayor of Los Angeles had a meeting, telephone conference meeting with other groups, and CCF, Miguel Santana, as we know, is agreeing to help provide assistance, monetary, and I know the mayor has asked me to join. I know that's something that I think all the board offices, or some of us, will want to be encouraged to get involved in to help expand financial assistance to people who are losing their jobs and need eviction assistance right now and other support. So that's just a FYI. Thank you.
Thank you. So that will conclude that item. We will now proceed with public, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm skipping ahead. We will now.
We're on item one.
Item one. We'll hear from the Chief Executive Officer, Fezia Davenport, on item one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving to the agenda items, we will start with item number one, which is fiscal year 24-25 budget issues. Item number one is the second mid-year appropriation adjustment board letter, commonly referred to as the second mid-year BA. This letter recommends numerous adjustments to the 24-25 final adopted budget in several budget units. By adopting the recommendations in this letter, your board will authorize changes that realign and adjust the operating and capital budgets referenced in the letter. Additionally, this letter delegates authority to my office to accept up to $1.1 million in No Place Like Home funding from the Los Angeles County Development Authority to partially fund due diligence activities related to the future Los Angeles County Care Community Project, which includes the renovation of existing structures at the Metro State Hospital campus for the purpose of providing permanent supportive housing. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on this item.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions? Seeing none.
If there are no questions, I recommend that your board move and approve the item.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, item one is before you.
Moved by Supervisor Horvath, seconded by Supervisor Mitchell to approve the item. Executive Office, please call the roll.
Supervisor Solis? Supervisor Solis, aye. Supervisor Mitchell?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell, aye. Supervisor Horvath?
Aye.
Supervisor Horvath, aye. Supervisor Hahn? Supervisor Barger?
Aye.
Supervisor Barger, aye. Motion carries 4-0. We will now move on to item
Supervisor
2.
Han's here now if you'd like to record her vote.
Supervisor Hahn?
Supervisor Hahn on item 1 will be recorded as an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 2. Chief Executive Officer Fezia Davenport will present.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is comprised of 3 items, items 2A, 2B, and 2C. Item 2A is my office's report summarizing issues raised by oral and written testimony at the public hearings held on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. Item 2B is my office's letter that includes proposed adjustments to the 25-26 recommended budget, which your board adopted on April 15th, 2025. The agenda item is comprised of 5 recommendations. The first recommendation seeks funding that the proposed capital project actions referenced in the board letter are not projects within the meaning of the California Environmental Quality Act based on the record of proposed activities. The second recommendation requests that your board adopt the proposed changes to the 25-26 recommended county budget as set forth in the board letter and on attachments 1 through 6 to the letter. Finally, the third, fourth, and fifth recommendations seek delegated authority related to funding agreements. Specifically, the letter authorizes my office, the Director of Economic Development, and the Executive Office of the Board, respectively, to execute and, if necessary, amend or terminate funding agreements for various programs in the amounts and for the purposes that are stated in the letter. And then item 2C for your board allows your board to order revisions and additions to the budget recommendations presented in item 2B as deemed necessary. I would recommend that any motion brought under item 2C be consistent with the board-approved fiscal resilience protocol. This concludes all the items for agenda item 2. I'm happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Seeing no questions from any of my colleagues, this motion is before us, moved by Supervisor Solis, seconded by Supervisor Hahn, to approve these items. Executive Officer, please call the roll.
Supervisor Solis?
Aye.
Supervisor Solis, aye. Supervisor Mitchell?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell, aye. Supervisor Horvath?
Aye.
Supervisor Horvath, aye. Supervisor Hahn?
Reluctantly, aye, since this is the one that takes away the extended swim season.
Supervisor Hahn, aye. Supervisor Barger?
Aye.
Supervisor Barger, aye. Motion carries 5-0. We will now move on to item 3. Chief Executive Officer Fezia Davenport will report on item 3.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 consists of 2 routine report backs. They are both a receive and file. Item 3A is an annual report from the County Director of Beaches and Harbors that provides information regarding additional revenue from marina leasehold extensions. The additional revenue this year is $160,925. Item 3B is a report that confirms that my office has identified $100 million for affordable housing programming and provides recommendations for the allocation of such funding. This concludes agenda item 3. Both reports are before you, and I recommend that your board receive and file these items.
All right, seeing no comments or questions from my colleagues, moved by Supervisor Mitchell, seconded by Supervisor Horvath. Executive Officer, please call the roll.
Madam Chair, these are for receive and file.
Oh, these are receive and file? Okay, they're moved and seconded to receive and file. Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll now move on to item 4, budget items, and hearing from Chief Executive Officer Fezia Davenport.
Thank you. Agenda item 4 is comprised of 3 recommendations in items 4A, 4B, and 4C. First, we have item 4A. This is my office's annual recommendations to approve the appropriations limit, also known as the GAN limit, also known as the limit, and the appropriations subject to limit for fiscal year 25-26. This GAN limit calculation is required under the state constitution. Next, there's item 4B. This item is a recommendation that your board approve, if applicable. I'm sorry, we don't need item 4B because the board did not make any changes to the budget. So the next item is item 4C.
4C.
Because the board didn't make any changes to the you approved item, the final changes board letter. So I'll explain. Item 4B is a recommendation that your board approve, if applicable, the revised figures as set forth in the final changes board budget letter for 25-26 and instruct the auditor controller to prepare and present the final budget resolution for board adoption. However, since no changes were made to the final changes board letter, the budget letter that you just approved, then this item is not needed.
Right.
Moving on to item 4C. This is a long one. Item 4C consists of 9 miscellaneous sections consisting of a series of delegated authority requests or instructions to departments for which we seek your board's approval annually to operationalize the adopted budget. More specifically, item numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8 seek authority to execute agreements on the terms set forth. Item number 5 seeks approval of the budgetary accounting policies. And then item number 6 delegates authority to my office to approve the transfers of appropriation as set forth in state budget law. Item number 7 seeks approval of temporary transfers of positions among departments. And lastly, item number 9 seeks the authority for the auditor controller to transfer monies as needed from the general fund to various homeless solution Measure A funds to meet the working capital needs of the Measure A funds. This concludes all the items under agenda item 4, and I'm happy to take any questions if the board has any.
Seeing no questions or comments, I will move that, seconded by Supervisor Hahn, to approve these items. Executive Officer, please call the roll.
Supervisor Solis?
Aye.
Supervisor Solis, aye. Supervisor Mitchell?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell, aye. Supervisor Horvath?
Aye.
Supervisor Horvath, aye. Supervisor Hahn?
Aye.
Supervisor Hahn, aye. Supervisor Barker?
Aye.
Supervisor Barker, aye. Motion carries 5-0. We're next going to be moving on to item 5, budget resolution. We will hear from Chief Executive Officer Fizia Davenport and the Auditor Controller, Oscar Valdez.
So the last item is agenda item number 5, adopt the 25-26 budget resolution. This item is for the County Auditor Controller, Oscar Valdez, to present to your board the 25-26 budget resolution. I will turn the proceedings over to Mr. Valdez.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Oscar Valdez, Auditor Controller. On April 15th, your board approved the fiscal year 25-26 recommended budget. This morning, we have updated all of those adjustments that your board approved during your deliberations this morning. The fiscal year 25-26 final budget is now balanced and ready for your final consideration.
All right, a man of important but few words. With that, moved by Supervisor Horvath, seconded by Supervisor Mitchell to approve this item. Executive Officer, please call the roll.
Supervisor Solis?
Aye.
Supervisor Solis, aye. Supervisor Mitchell?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell, aye. Supervisor Horvath?
Aye.
Supervisor Horvath, aye. Supervisor Hahn?
I guess so, aye.
Supervisor Hahn, aye. Supervisor Barger?
Aye.
Supervisor Barger, aye. Motion carries 5-0.
All right, well, this concludes today's meeting. I want to thank all the department heads that are out there. I like you all being dead center so we can look at you while we're talking. So thank you for the work that you do during these difficult times. I think I can speak for the board by saying that we do appreciate each and every one of you and your commitment to the county. The next public hearing meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, June 24th, 2025 at 9:30 a.m. The special meeting of the fiscal year 2025-26 budget deliberations is adjourned. Thank you.